Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
When the first RoboCop movie was released in 1987, very few people knew Paul Verhoeven. He made films in Dutch, but RoboCop was his second filmmaking venture in the English language. For those of you who know, RoboCop took the world by storm because it wasn't just a regular action flick. Verhoeven added social commentary to his action blockbuster, turning it into a dystopian satire. What fascinates me about Verhoeven is that he's not your average Hollywood director. He didn't go to film school. Verhoeven had an MSc degree in mathematics and minored in physics. He was a nerd, like you and me, and he was also a big fan of comic books. It was his scientific temperament that helped him make a movie like RoboCop. When Verhoeven read the original script for RoboCop, written by Edward Neumeier and Michael Miner, he threw the script in the trash. It was just your average dumb Hollywood action flick, and Verhoeven hated it. Thankfully, his wife fished it out of the trash and read it and urged Verhoeven to do the same without prejudice and look for the soul of the story. It was the character of Alex Murphy who finally convinced Verhoeven to take up the script, as he saw a Christ-like allegory in his character. Verhoeven did multiple rewrites for the script to give it more depth and add a layer of philosophy to otherwise regular action movie. RoboCop is known for its unfiltered violence, and this violence was a direct reflection from Verhoeven's own childhood. He grew up in Nazi-occupied Netherlands during the Second World War, and as a child, he witnessed the horrors of the war, with dead bodies lying on the road, and the bombings that almost killed his family once. "I am not afraid of violence because I have seen it," Verhoeven once proclaimed. I think he never wanted the audience to think they were watching a dumb action movie where the fighting is stylized and the violence is unrealistic, to make them feel comfortable. The violence is uncensored to show how it is normalized in a dehumanized society and make the audience uncomfortable with the reality and grotesqueness of it. By now, you understand Verhoeven was a man who loved his craft, and his singular vision was to tell his story. This is why, when he approached to direct RoboCop 2, he vehemently refused to do so, because he had already finished telling his story. "I don't like sequels," he stated, expressing his hatred for Hollywood's sequel machine for its lack of creativity. He preferred to work on an entirely new venture rather than repeating his past triumphs, so he said no when the studio approached him, resulting in a creative fallout between him and the executives. Since the first RoboCop was a success, they wanted to capitalize on that success and follow up on that, but Verhoeven had already moved on to Total Recall. So, the studio brought in Irvin Kershner to direct RoboCop 2, which was a hit and is still a cult favorite among fans, but it missed out on the witty satire that Verhoeven's RoboCop had. Then came RoboCop 3, which was absolute trash. I can't say which was worse, RoboCop 3 or the 2014 reboot. RoboCop 3 was rated PG-13, unlike its predecessors, completely forgoing the hardcore violence, and that was disappointing for fans like us who loved the original. The 2014 reboot could have been a success if we hadn't had the previous RoboCop movies to compare it to. The reboot fell into the Hollywood origin story trap with a PG-13 rating. I thought it was the end of RoboCop until I came across Dynamite Entertainment's 2010 RoboCop comic book series. I couldn't stop smiling when I realized it actually redeems the franchise, completely ignoring the sequels, which weren't that great by the way, and continues the edgy and satirical lore of Verhoeven's original movie. Dynamite Entertainment continued the story from where the first RoboCop movie left off and added the same brand of satire that Verhoeven did with brutal violence, Murphy's Christ-like allegory, and the corporate dystopia. In today's video, I'm going to dive deep into the pages of the comic and explore how it brings back the real, uncensored world of RoboCop. So, let's begin. OCP takes over the Detroit Police Department. The first issue starts with a news telecast with Casey Wong and Jess Perkins anchoring for Media Break. The breaking news is that the U.S. economy is in shambles, with some big corporate houses failing and unemployment at its peak. U.S. troops fighting overseas have been fighting a war for 8 years, and they've received a new piece of technology which has boosted the morale of the soldiers. Apparently they were fighting a lost battle, but this new technology makes them believe that the war can be won. We are then introduced to Edwina Odenkirk, the new CEO of Omni Consumer Products. She has taken over the company after an illness gripped the founder, and she managed to secure a multi-billion-dollar deal with the military, which saved her company from a hostile takeover. In the next panel, we see Edwina walk up to a man who is lying on a chair with a lot of tubes attached to his body, and I mean lots. You can immediately tell something's wrong with him. His face is hidden, but we get a glimpse of his hand and his mouth, both of which are covered in wrinkles. The old man mistakes Edwina for Dick and seems to feel nostalgic for old Detroit, and says he doesn't remember something. Edwina refers to this man as Sir, establishing his authority as the founder of OCP. This is the first issue of Revolution, and we see RoboCop in an awesome car chase scene. He's firing shots at the car before him, and wondering how the goons they are chasing ended up in a DPD armored car. The man in the other car is holding a cop hostage, and in an instant he flings the cop to the other car and shoots him. He tells RoboCop to stop chasing them, otherwise he will kill the other 3 cops he's holding hostage. RoboCop shoots him straight in the head, blowing his brains out. A woman blocks their path, standing before both cars holding 2 children. RoboCop jumps into the other car, and the car screeches as it halts before running over the woman. The other goon holds a woman cop hostage, but RoboCop shoots him in the head too. A ton of strange robots surround RoboCop and start shooting. He hides behind the car to avoid the bullets, but they continue shooting, leaving hundreds of bullets on the road. In the next scene, we're in a police station where the cop who was with Murphy, aka RoboCop, tells the sergeant that there are killer robots on the streets of Old Detroit, wearing DPD colors, and they blew up the armored car with the 2 cops still inside it. Andy's metal body has bullet holes in it and looks worn out, but he says he's fine and claims that the robots are made by OCP. Right at this moment, Edwina walks in with armed guards and says her robots just made the streets safer for the people of Old Detroit. She mocks the police for being incompetent and having their armored car stolen. The sergeant asks her who she is, and she shows them her ID card, telling them she is their boss because OCP owns the police department, which happens to be privatized. She fires all the cops and orders them to clean out their lockers and leave in 10 minutes, claiming that they are not doing their jobs properly since crime is rampant in Old Detroit. Her role as CEO is to increase profit and cut costs, so she will not be paying them any pension. The armed men beside her point their guns at the cops. The cops also point their guns, completely rattled by the events. The wall blasts off, and Edwina introduces them to the ED-209s, the robot replacements for the cops, the same robots that shot at RoboCop earlier. Edwina tells them the robots are more effective because they work 24 hours without any pay, and tells the cops to put down their weapons and walk away to face consequences. Murphy warns the cops that if the robots open fire at them, it will turn into a bloodbath, and Edwina asks Murphy to stay back since she has some work to discuss with him. The scene shifts again to a field reporter, Loretta Pools from Media Break, who says the experts are calling this act by the OCP a revolution. Edwina appears on screen and tells the media that crime will no longer be tolerated on the streets with the new state-of-the-art police force. The footage goes on to introduce the ED-209 robots, which shoot at a burglar on the run, killing him. Turns out Media Break is owned by OCP, and that's what makes them unreliable. In a world where everything's privatized, it is impossible to trust any institution, even the ones that constitute the pillars of justice. Another footage of an ex-WWF wrestler and councilman of Detroit, Mason Manslaughter Vogler, is shown, who tells the audience that the leaders have failed society with no employment. People are starving, and the only thing to do now is to take the basic necessities back with force and fight back with firepower. Next up, there is footage of a satirical message with a boy complaining to his father that he's hungry and he can barely stand because his legs are hurting. The father shows a machine called the OCP Food Recycler, which finds scraps of good nutritional food from human waste. The next panel starts off with where the earlier scene ended, with Edwina and Murphy. He tells her he's a cop, so if the other cops are fired, then so is he. Edwina calls him Alex Murphy and wonders how much human is still left within him, with only a lump of torso and some portions of the brain, and his face to make other people feel comfortable around him. She shows him a contract and tells him the OCP owns 92% of his body, so he could either work for the DPD along with the ED-209s, or they will remove all the bits owned by OCP and put the rest of him in a plastic bag. Murphy grits his teeth and points a gun at her, threatening to shoot. Edwina remains nonchalant and tells him there are 24 ED-209s ready to blow him up. All he needs to do is keep working as a cop, for which he'll be paid a bonus. A bald guy wearing a lab coat introduces himself as Wagner and tells Murphy that they will help him access his old memories with their new brain matter interface. He makes Murphy sit on a chair and he seems to be in pain as he gets flashes from his past life in fragments, seeing his wife, partner, friend, dog, and child. In the next scene, we see Vogler standing before Eat More, perhaps a food shop, with a gun. He fires and blows up the building and says, "Fuck the economy, let's eat." Guess he has started his revolution of taking things back with force. In the next scene, we see the old man again, tubes attached to his body. This time we get a glimpse of his face as he looks at smoke emerging from different parts of the city. He's an old man with blue eyes who again mentions Dick and says he finally recalls what he did. Vogler's revolution begins. The second issue of the comic starts with footage played by Media Break News. An ED-209 visits a children's elementary school, and the kids are all excited to meet Old Detroit's new law enforcement. A fire breaks out at an old apartment, and an ED-209 blasts off a wall to save people still stuck in the building. But in doing so, the building is annihilated. The anchor concludes calling it one less drug slum building for the city planners to worry about. It is followed by a promotional message where a cop who doesn't play by the rules gets a new partner. Initially reluctant, but when he sees an ED-209, he's impressed, and together they are branded as Rage and the Machine, like a Cop Buddy series. In another scene, fire trucks are on the road, which are revealed to be food trucks with armed soldiers inside. They deliver at night to avoid getting attacked by looters. Suddenly, the truck at the front collapses into a massive hole covered by cloth, causing it to catch fire. The other trucks also halt and the looters start firing at the tires, blocking them from moving further. The looters are led by Vogler, who tells them that this is the food they deserve. Suddenly, an ED-209 robot enters the scene and shoots all the looters except for Vogler and a girl. RoboCop arrives on the scene and seems frustrated with the robots, saying that they ought to give a warning first. The girl surrenders before the robot, and RoboCop has to intervene by pointing a gun at the robot, telling it to stand down because she is under arrest. Murphy places both the girl and Vogler under arrest, but Vogler manages to run. In a press conference, Edwina reveals that Vogler was one of the criminals who was killed. The pathologists are testing the remains of the looters to confirm their identities. With a stern face, she again says that crime will not be tolerated in Old Detroit. In a bar where a group of ex-cops are watching the live telecast, they call Edwina the Wicked Witch of the West and presume she might be running for the president, selling her new vision of a new America. Murphy arrives at the bar and the other cops seem annoyed to see him as they think he's working with the robots while they are out of jobs and out of funds. Murphy explains he's there to control the robots. The sergeant agrees, saying the people on the streets aren't safe with the robots, but doesn't seem to believe that is the only reason Murphy is working for the OCP. He tells them he wishes to talk, but they ask him to leave. Just as Murphy leaves and is about to get into the car, a man stops him, saying that they shut down the internet all over the city. Murphy is a little surprised at this intrusion and points a gun at the man. The man reveals that he is a reporter, Jerome H. Moss, from the Old Detroit Beacon, which is the only newspaper not owned by OCP, and the only newspaper that objectively criticizes the OCP. Murphy remains unfazed because if he doesn't have a crime to report, then there's no point in continuing the conversation. Moss stops him and asks him to ponder why the OCP stopped at one RoboCop while they are mass-producing ED-209s. They kept RoboCop on their payroll but fired the other cops, so what does the OCP want from him? Murphy doesn't pay heed to his questions and drives away. The man sighs in sorrow and repeats that they shut off the internet before walking away. We again see a news telecast with Casey Wong and Jess Perkins anchoring for Media Break. Wong says that the internet is broken in Old Detroit, and before he can explain, an armed man in bloody clothes walks into the studio and shoots Jess in the face. Wong tries to negotiate with the shooter, asking him to spare his life, but gets shot in the face too. His accomplices take control of the control room, and the armed shooter is revealed to be Vogler, who is ready to broadcast. He says he wants to reveal the truth about the city that killed his fellow freedom fighters, but the telecast stops and an ad plays where a rich old guy is playing volleyball with some pretty girls in bikinis, taking away the attention from him with some aspirational imagery and entertainment. In the next panel, Murphy is sitting on the chair with two men in lab coats around him, probably working on his memory. In the next panel, we again see the old man with the tubes attached to his body. He says, "Wake up and remember," and we immediately get a shot of Murphy with his wife. But in the next panel, Edwina interrupts and tells Murphy he's needed. There are armed intruders in the media break building, and the ED-209s are unable to go in. Why, you ask? Because they can't climb stairs. A major design flaw, I'd say. Murphy is flying in a chopper, but the intruders fire at the chopper with a stinger. It catches fire, so Murphy jumps off the chopper. RoboCop saves the day, but there's a deeper conspiracy at play. The third issue starts with the award-winning field reporter Mitch Romanowski standing in the middle of dead bodies and overturned cars with fire in the background, who seems to have lost an arm. Blood is spurting from the end of the blasted-off arm and he's hardly able to speak. "Big robot!" he exclaims, and is shot as the footage ends. Back in the building of Media Break, Murphy flings himself through the window and takes down one of the intruders with him, before crashing down the building through the floors of the building. The other intruder feels relieved at being saved, but the chopper comes crashing down into the building, killing him on impact, and causing the sprinklers to turn on. Vogler tells his followers to get ready for battle as the robots are here to silence their truth. He says flesh is good and metal is evil, a classic man versus machine allegory. Murphy arrives on the scene and tells them they are all under arrest. Vogler and his men point their guns at him, telling him they will only take judgment from God, as they begin to shoot at him, killing their own man in the process. Murphy fires his shots, killing all the men except Vogler, who runs. He gets hold of a big gun and shoots at Murphy, who is hurt by the impact. Vogler continues shooting at Murphy, who punches Vogler. He tells Murphy that he's just a pawn to be used in this capitalist society with his metal body. Murphy continues to punch him and tells him he's under arrest. The news reports that the Media Break building is safe, all thanks to RoboCop. Moss is denied entry to the scene, and he quickly deciphers that it is because he doesn't work for OCP. Edwina stops Murphy and tells him they will escort Vogler from this point onwards. Murphy seems confused and asks why, but Moss ambushes Edwina and asks whether OCP intentionally cut off communication between Detroit and the rest of the US. She asks his guards to get Moss out, who screams that he's a tax-paying citizen who has the right to question them. Edwina orders Murphy to return to Wagner and have his next memory downloaded. Moss continues screaming, but Murphy strangles him, lifting him off the ground and tells him to leave the area quietly. He pulls him closer and very quietly tells him to follow Vogler's van to see where it goes. In the van, Vogler is sitting with handcuffs, and the van screeches to a halt. The door opens, and it's Edwina standing before Vogler with a couple of ED-209 robots. She coaxes him to try to escape, but clearly she means to fire at him, and that's exactly what Vogler thinks. Moss gets his camera ready to take pictures. Vogler gets out of the van, and the ED-209 points towards him. Edwina tells him to raise his hand towards her, or she'll ask the robots to fire, but in an unexpected twist, she takes out a key and unlocks his handcuffs. She gives him a card with an address to a warehouse filled with lots of weaponry for him and his followers. Vogler is confused as to why she's helping him, but she tells him that once he attacks, the world will see OCP save the city. Vogler grabs her by the neck and kisses her and then insults her. He walks away with the card and thanks her for the guns. Moss takes his last picture, but the robot turns towards him. He drops the camera in shock, and Edwina notices him. She says he's not important, mistaking him for an employee, and walks back to her car. In the lab, Wagner begins the memory download, and we get a panel of the old man with tubes saying he can almost remember. Vogler gets the guns from the warehouse. Lewis gets a message from Murphy saying he needs her help. Vogler and his men start terrorizing the city with their guns, while Wagner switches to another memory download. The Old Man's Offer. The fourth issue begins with Dick Jones introducing himself as the vice president of OCP. Murphy is standing before him, pointing a gun, completely surprised, asking how. Dick continues speaking, saying OCP's labs like to create surprises, but someone interrupts him and tells Murphy that Dick can be turned off. An older man appears behind Dick and tells Murphy he never liked Dick, even if he was good at his job. His obvious greed and ambition were unattractive. The background is filled with the OCP logo, which shocks Murphy. city. The old man changes the background again to a more relaxing one under clear blue skies and a vast field. Clearly, this is the same old man who's connected with the tubes, and he tells Murphy he's brought him here for a reason. Murphy is absolutely surprised to find that he's back in his old human body. The old man tells him he has a proposition for him, something that they both want. Back in the city of Detroit, the streets are filled with ED-309s shooting at Vogler's armed men. The streets are filled with dead bodies, burning cars, and thick fogs of smoke. We find ourselves back at the news desk where the anchor smiles and says the streets of Detroit are safe and there's nothing to be afraid of. Edwina smiles at the camera and tells the media that crime in Detroit has grown and therefore even their guns have grown bigger, referring to the 50-foot ED-309s, the upgraded technology which are fighting the battles overseas with the US troops. The helicopter with the reporter covers the live footage of the city from the sky. One of the robots looks at the helicopter and the cameraman asks whether it knows they are not a threat. The reporter says it must have been reprogrammed to recognize media. Right then, the chopper blasts into pieces. One of Vogler's men asks him to run, saying he's too important to them. Vogler says no, but the guy is blown off into bits, his arm still attached to Vogler. Edwina is standing in a lab with a lot of people wearing white lab coats. One of them tells her that one of her ED-309s shot down a news chopper. Edwina doesn't care and thinks it would be too cliched if the robots go out of control and blow up the entire city. The man tells her that their data shows that the robot did not like the helicopter. Edwina seems unfazed and tells them to get more choppers to cover the news to show the country how well OCP is dealing with the situation. Meanwhile, she's preparing for the old man's comeback. Someone tells her the president is on the line, but she says she's too busy disciplining the country and drinking her latte. Moss finds out that the OCP has shut down his newspaper and shut down the internet now that he's got evidence of the CEO conspiring with Vogler. So he decides to go down the old route and go to the cops. He visits the bar where the ex-cops are having a drink. We're back to the scene with Murphy telling the old guy that he's just a machine and he can't help him. The old guy tells Murphy that he was meant to be brain dead, but he was made so hurriedly that something went wrong and he retained a sense of his old self and some of his memories. He's unique and that makes him very useful because the old man is dying. The old man, who is now sitting on a chair with tubes attached to his body, tells Murphy that he would have been dead a long time ago because of his age, but some technology is keeping him alive, and he wants to use the technology to cheat death by transferring his mind into Murphy's body. It's what Wagner and his team were testing out in the name of memory downloads, and they are confident it will work. Murphy is standing next to the man, back in his RoboCop body, outraged to hear this, and asks him why he would agree to this proposition. The old man tells him he will transfer Murphy's mind into his body, which might be dying, but is a body made of flesh. He offers Murphy a chance to turn back human and hug his family and to feel the warmth of human contact. In the city, Vogler continues to fire shots at the robots. People are watching the live telecast on the television with snacks as if they're watching an exhilarating action film. Vogler continues to fire at the robot, successfully breaking one down and tearing its wires. Edwina claims it's embarrassing to watch while Vogler continues his rampage and tells the world that a man defeated a machine, but a rain of bullets hits his body as he screams out in pain. The man with Edwina asks her what to do with the rest of the looters, as they seem to have given up. Edwina tells them that as long as there are cameras around, continue to make a statement. In the next scene, the old man awaits Murphy's answer and tells him he's not a bad guy. He wants to close the deal amicably, to which Murphy consents. The people at the lab begin the memory transference process, but Lewis comes and stops the procedure. She gets shot in the chest and asks Murphy to remember who he is, to which Murphy replies that he is human. In the city, a girl throws away her gun and starts to run as a robot comes her way. She is saved by the ex-cops who have arrived to stop a crime. Lewis lies on the ground bleeding out and she tells Murphy that they're all human and reminds him that he's a cop. The men wearing lab coats begin the transfer and we get a panel of the old man smiling. Meanwhile, in the city, the robots continue to shoot at the cops, but all of a sudden the robots shut down and Edwina looks angry as she screams and asks who's controlling the system. We're back in the open field where Murphy is pointing a gun at the old guy and the human version of him says he can't hold the robots anymore. The old guy is confused and asks Murphy how he is doing this. He replies saying that he has been plugged directly into the OCP system and can control it, so he's turning down his offer of transference. The old man clenches his teeth as he threatens Murphy, telling him that OCP owns the city, which has no TV, no internet, no crime, and no cops anymore. Murphy is back in the present as he lifts Lewis in his arms and says there are still cops in this city. pulling out all the stops to save Lewis. Murphy needs to find a doctor for Lewis, but the hospitals in the city have closed down or have been cleaned out by the looters. The ER has also been wiped clean, and there is a chance that the doctors are held hostage. Murphy feels guilty because she got shot trying to save him, and because she's one of the few people who care for the human in him. Without her, he's nothing but RoboCop. He calls out for a doctor and is surprised to encounter Dick Jones, VP of OCP, who he thought was dead. Jones tells him he's the one who killed him, and it drives Murphy crazy as he keeps telling himself it's not real, it's just a hallucination. He reminds himself he needs to help Lewis. He finds a girl covered in blood, groaning in pain. Murphy pulls her up and asks her where the doctors are, threatening to gut her. She tells Murphy that the doctors and patients already left, and only one girl doctor stayed behind to help, but she might be dead by now. Murphy stabs her in the shoulder, asking her to take them to the doctor or die bleeding out. Lewis calmly reminds him that he's a police officer. The streets are empty as Murphy drives the car along with Lewis and the girl, who tells him there's a warehouse by the dock where they are storing food and drugs, and the doctor would be there too, since a doctor at this time would be valuable. Murphy gets a weird vision of the old man who screams, "Help me," but he runs the car over it as his remains splatter all over the windshield. They barely escape a robot, but it starts chasing their car. The girl asks Murphy to throw away the dead girl, but he says Lewis is still breathing. They slip into a narrow road between two buildings, thinking the robot won't be able to follow them here, but it launches a missile which blasts their car. Murphy picks up Lewis in his arms and vows to protect her, but the ED-209 calls backup, trapping them in. He punches a hole in the wall of the building and exits from there. As they reach the docks, they find many warehouses, and he uses his thermal imaging to find which warehouse there are people hiding in. Counting 17 heavily armed people, he puts Lewis down and promises to bring back the doctor. She reminds him to give them a warning before firing at them because he's a cop. They kiss before departing, and the vision of Dick Jones goads him to kill all the people in the warehouse. Murphy warns them as he enters the warehouse and places them all under arrest, but they shoot at him anyway, so he fires back. He finds the doctor locked in a room and asks her to save Lewis. As she examines Lewis, she tells him that Lewis has been dead for hours, so all this had just been a hallucination. OCP to invade Canada? The last issue starts with a huge robot overlooking the city and a young boy watching it. The robot fires 2 missiles at the boy. Edwina is running on the treadmill when someone comes in and tells her that they are ready to brief her about the press conference, but Edwina refuses, saying she knows what she has to say. The president has given a statement that has reason to cause alarm, but Edwina tells them she just needs to show them who is in charge. A man comes in and tells Edwina that they lost one ED-309. Perhaps it got damaged during the battle with Vogler. The robot is worth hundreds of $millions, and it is a killing machine. The ED-309 shoots at a man peacefully fishing in the sea. One of the guys with Edwina shares his theory that the robot thinks the US is at war with another country, since it was made to be a war machine, so it's going north to invade the closest country, Canada. The ex-cops are tracking the robot, and they decide to shoot at the knees and hope for the best, since there's nothing much to do with a 50-foot killing machine. They swerve around and try to shoot again, but the robot shoots at them, knocking their car over. All of them are in a critical state, but when the robot moves towards them, Murphy blocks the path, pushing the robot to a halt. The robot is about to shoot at Murphy, but it stops all of a sudden when it looks at him. Edwina's men plan on sending 4 ED-309s to stop the rogue robot, but Edwina refuses to execute it, saying that if they do so, they will end up losing hundreds of millions of dollars, and she needs to make a profit. Edwina plans to let it invade Canada and asks to get the Prime Minister on the phone. The cops ask Murphy where Lewis is as he drives, and he lies and says she's fine. They're all following the robot and are shocked to find that it destroyed an entire US military base. As it approaches a bridge that crosses into Canada, Edwina's man asks her to blow up the bridge to stop it, but turns out Edwina sold 6 ED-309s to the Canadian Prime Minister and had them airlifted to the border, making her a profit of $1 billion. It also showcased her product in the international market. After reading Dynamite Entertainment's RoboCop comic series, I think it would have been the perfect continuation of Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop movie, because it manages to capture Verhoeven's dystopian satire perfectly. In a world where every institution is privatized, it is impossible to trust institutions like the police, the government, or even the media. Only the first RoboCop movie was able to criticize this militarization of the corporate world, and this comic book manages to do the same perfectly, by showing how the media houses praise OCP OCP's decision to replace cops with robots and celebrate it as a tech launch. Even when the robots end up killing people, no one raises any questions about the ethics of technological inventions. Even when Vogler takes over the news broadcast, an advertisement is played to distract the public, keeping them entertained and away from the chaos. News footage of mass murders and destruction is then packaged as entertainment, desensitizing viewers to violence. OCP cuts the internet without having to answer to anyone, and Edwina refuses to pick up the president's phone call, proving that the government itself is a puppet in the hands of the corporation. No one is there to check the institutions and criticize them, as they all get paid by the same OCP. The comic also continues the internal struggle of Alex Murphy, who is questioning if he's still human and also wants to regain his previous memories. The comic has violence that rivals Verhoeven's RoboCop, as you often come across panels where people are blown to bits. Just like in the movie, the old man continues to remain a mysterious figure, and we do not learn his name even here. The ending of the comic comes across as abrupt because Dynamite Entertainment had plans to tie it into a larger arc. It also undoes all the character development Murphy went through. He is left unstable with his partner dying, who was his last shred of the man he used to be. Getting plugged into the OCP system, Murphy is broken, left to deal with recurring hallucinations. But overall, I think Verhoeven would have liked this version, which kept his vision intact.